The Pokemon Fire Red speedrunning community has been in complete shock for the past month thanks to a brand new discovery that saves a super crazy amount of time thanks to an oversight produced by simply pressing a single button. And normally you'd think that such a groundbreaking discovery would be figured out by a speedrunning expert who's been theory crafting or investigating a game for hundreds of thousands of hours. But sometimes big discoveries are found when you aren't even trying to find them by people who have almost no connection to speedrunning. And today's story is one such case where someone accidentally found one of the biggest time saves in glitchless speedrun history by accidentally pressing a single button. Really quickly, gamers, it's time to talk about cards from today's sponsor, Arena Club. If you've never heard of Arena Club, they have a super unique way of doing digital and physical cards at the same time, specializing in sports, the magical TCG, and Pokemon cards. But I personally hate the interaction you have to deal with when buying Pokemon cards and the fact that it's not always guaranteed, which is a big part of what I think makes Arena Club unique. So the way it works is they put together their own packs, show you what you can get from their site. Anything you get digitally, you can receive physically exactly the way that they show. Pre-graded and everything. And the moment you open up a pack, you can actually see exactly what went into creating this card and sell it straight back to them at fair market value, which is exactly what I'm going to do right now. So we're over here in the Pokemon section. As you guys can see, we got a bunch of packs in front of us. I am specifically going to be going for the Ruby one in hopes that maybe I can get this delicious looking Latios Latios. As a Pokemon speedrunner, I like to think I'm pretty lucky sometimes, like with this pack. Come on! Groudon? Ooh, wait, yo, okay. I'm a big fan. So now that we've opened this, I have about 24 hours to decide if I just want to keep it digitally, if I want to have it physically, or we can go with straight market value and sell it back to Arena Club here and now. At the end of the day, you'll have so many choices you can use with Arena Club. If this service sounds awesome to you, be sure to jump in and grab 20% off your first slab pack or card by hitting arenaclub.com/pulse and popping in code PULSE at the checkout. Our story begins with a person named Clemmy, who had recently purchased the new port of Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green on the Nintendo Switch. And in order to start off his Pokemon adventure, he knew he wanted one of the best Charmanders he could possibly get. So, over the course of a couple of days, he would spend hours resetting over and over again to meet very strict stat requirements. But unfortunately for Clemmy, nothing quite came of it until he suddenly pressed the L button moments after picking another Charmander. Did you notice anything there, by the way? Listen closely. That is not normal. This is. But hearing this lack of jingle didn't fully alarm Clemmy, as they thought that perhaps that was some sort of bug, so he put it in the back of his mind and started his Charmander resetting adventures up again. And normally this would be where most stories like this would end, but fate had a different plan for Clemmy because he had a destined meeting with the speedrun community as he would eventually find his god Charmander, then proceed to Route 22 to the left of Viridian City for a Mankey to help deal with Brock. But the moment after he successfully caught Mankey, history chose to have his finger slip onto that subscribe button. Anyways, by actually pressing the L button at the perfect time, turning an L into a W and gracing us with some true potential for time save. And that is what's known as Clemmy Skip. So what's happening during Clemmy Skip is with how the game is coded, it wants to play background music during certain sections like finishing a successful cat. And normally the game would wait until the entire jingle is over to proceed with any text during those sequences. But if you interrupt that music, it'll continue to print text on screen, saving a few seconds each time you interrupt it. But the only way to actually interrupt it is with this little menu known as the help menu. Now, I imagine most of you have never really brought up or explored the menu unless it was by complete accident, which is completely fair given you can just go into the options and turn it off completely, which is actually something speedrunners do all the time to give themselves an extra button to mash text with by turning the L button into an extra A button. So truthfully, I don't think a speedrunner would have ever found this on their own because of that. But a casual player like Clemmy, who just so happened to keep the default options to enjoy a brand new release of Fire Red on the Switch, was the perfect candidate to align the stars for this insane skip. And the moment he discovered this by pure chance a second time, he knew this was no longer an accident, then proceeded to join the Gen 1 through 3 Pokemon Speedrun Discord to share his findings. And as you can see, this was pretty big news to our community. But I imagine with everything I've said so far, a couple of big questions pop up in your head. Like, is this considered a glitch? Can this be used in other places to skip jingles outside of catches? And how much time save does it actually save? So, considering we're just pressing a button to interrupt a game's action, many folks have stated that this doesn't really cross into glitch territory and is more of an unintended exploit, which means that it's going to be allowed in glitchless categories. But for the second question, its uses unfortunately have so far been limited to very few things. Currently, you can save about 2.5 seconds every time you catch something, save about 11 frames each time you level up and teach a move, and that's pretty much it. Because unfortunately, you can't skip the badge earning jingle, you can't skip Pokemon cries, you can't skip the long evolution sounds, but hilariously enough, you can skip the Pokemon catching tutorial jingle. Pretty funny stuff, but I imagine this seems fairly minimal, and it very much is if you only look at the any percent glitchless category that only tries to beat the game, which saves maybe 10 seconds at best. So instead, we ended up looking at a different category, because where the real time save happens is a fan favorite speedrun in Fire Red known as the Round 2 category. A category which requires you to face and defeat the harder version of the Elite Four, the likes of which are so hard that taking a 3-minute detour to obtain Mewtwo is considered worth it. To unlock that Elite Four, however, you are required to complete side quests and post-game events on the Sevi Islands and unlock the National Deck. But to even unlock those quests and the National Decks, you are required to register 60 unique Pokemon into your Pokedex, half of which can usually evolve to their final stages or get them as gifts, but the truth of the matter is that you will typically have to catch around 30 of them. However, that number can differ a lot between runs, which had me thinking about the fact that there is only a 17-second difference between first and second place in this category. So I couldn't help but wonder, if this discovery had been found when those times were set, would that have provided a more significant gap? Let me start by explaining how we go about catching Pokemon a bit more to better understand why the catch count between Pokeguy and Gunner Maniac were so different, as well as to better understand the category as a whole. So a general rule of thumb when it comes to Fire Red Round 2 speedruns is to try and catch as many Pokemon as possible alongside story progression. That is, unless a Pokemon is really hard to catch with lower tier Pokeballs, then it becomes more efficient to wait and backtrack till later. And considering Squirtle is the Pokemon of choice to clear the story until we obtain Mewtwo, the path to victory is quite clear as we start to seek out Pokemon like Caterpie and Weedle early on for extremely easy to catch and evolve dex entries. And it'll typically be those type of Pokemon that will be the biggest prize of them all, but beggars can't always be choosers when the most efficient way to obtain Pokemon is to grab them along the way of story progression. Because sometimes you have really bad Pokeballs and you'll have to delay it for later. But other times that logic can be counterbalanced because 60 dex entries is a lot of entries to deal with. So no matter what, we'll have to go out of our way to locations to get certain Pokemon to meet that requirement. For example, not getting Pikachu in Viridian Forest means you'll have to come back to Rock Tunnel when you get Surf for a trip to the power plant. Because Pikachu is actually way more than just Pikachu and Raichu's dex entries. It's also a trade for Electrode. And despite how long the trade animation takes to play out compared to catching, the building you obtain that trade in actually has multiple trades in it, meaning you save time on traveling to other potential locations, and you can guarantee a dex entry with a few clicks of a button. But with that in mind, that begs the question as to which locations are worth catching Pokemon in. So far, the list goes Viridian Forest, Mount Moon, Diglett's Tunnel, Safari Zone, Power Plant, Cinnabar Mansion, the Sevi Islands, Victory Road, and the mostly grassy routes that connect to those locations. And if you paid enough attention to this point, you know that most of those locations are required to go through to actually progress the story. But with 60 different dex entries required, strategies can differ quite heavily based on who you can actually find and catch in the limited space that you're given. Which again begs the question, how would Clemmy Skip affect the first and second place times given the different strategies they used? So Gunner Maniac's side was a little bit more catch heavy, having caught 32 Pokemon, while Pokeguy's side was a little bit more trade heavy, catching about 30 Pokemon, which if added together equal up to about 1 minute and 30 seconds of time save for Pokeguy and 1 minute and 36 seconds for Gunner Maniac, since each catch saves exactly 2.68 seconds if you perform Clemmy Skip perfectly. But if you then add all the level up time saved from Clemmy Skip, with each of them saving about 10 seconds total, since each Clemmy Skip done perfectly with level ups saves about 11 frames every time you do it. Now that we have Clemmy Skip up front and center, giving us more reason to catch instead of trade, folks like PokeGuy might have actually done things differently if this was known. And the reason I say this is because PokeGuy is one of the folks helping develop catch-heavy strategies in places like the Safari Zone, where repels are being used to avoid certain encounters in certain zones. The details of which can be best explained by the world record holder himself, Gunner Maniac.
First off, Eevee's in the front. Next things next. Entrance, terrible. Why would you ever search there? Idiotic. All right, making our way to Area 3. Oh, that was a first tile encounter. All right, this is the biggest thing that round 2 runners can instantly implement into their runs. It is trolling to stay in this zone right now. And allow me to show you why. Because this is entrance part 2. This is the entrance. And in the entrance, it's just Area 3, except it has Rhyhorn instead of Doduo. It's the nuts. Now we get to do something really funny. We're actually leaving here. We're going here. And because we already have Paris, we get to repel here. And it gets rid of only Paris. Boom. Male Nidoran. Level 30. And now this is crazy. This is actually the craziest section. We're actually going back to the entrance. Through a completely different entrance. Right now, I am 90% for a good encounter. With Repel Up, by the way, in this zone. Now, I am 70% for a good encounter right now. Yeah. So, I am 60% for only Rhyhorn and Nidorino here, which means I just get to continue to stay. And now, for fun, swap Blastoise to the front. No more encounters.
Now, I imagine this all looks pretty amazing, but there's one very small problem with this whole setup.
You gotta watch out for that one.
But with awesome strategies like this, it is making the race to beat the round 2 world record an absolutely amazing one, especially given that there's nearly 2 minutes of time saved for free on the board, which is why I'm actually really happy to see little baby steps towards a really insane world record. Because 2 days before I actually posted this video, we got a 3-second improvement to the Fire Red round 2 world record, with so much time saved still to be had and to be explored. If you want to see some runners do this live, check out the names on screen. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe here as well, and I'll be posting an update video once the world record has been officially and thoroughly destroyed. Also, one final thanks to my subscribers here on Patreon.